I would like to show my respect and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which these interviews take place. I would also like to respectfully acknowledge the Wangal people, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work. Hi, I'm Prema, the host of this podcast, What Can We Do? I started this podcast in 2019 because I was feeling overwhelmed and anxious about issues affecting communities. There's so much going on in this world, so much to address, so much to fix. Where's the best place to start? Here. In each episode, I speak to someone or an organization that's making impact. You will learn about the issue, why it exists, the challenges, but most importantly, how you can be a part of the solution. My hope is that you can take away 2 to 3 tips each episode that will support you in your helping journey. Today I have with me Olivia Acciarito from COOK4CALD.
Hi, I'm Olivia. My name's Olivia Acciarito. I'm from COOK4CALD. We're a small volunteer, youth-led and youth-run organisation. We operate mainly in the city of Casey, and what we do is we provide food relief by providing meals to CALD communities in our area.
How long has COOK4CALD been running?
So we started up last year around December, late November. So really not that long. Our first program was in December last year, and we ran through December through to, I think, could be the first week of February or the last week of January. And yeah, we've just gone pretty much from strength to strength since then. We are running a lockdown program right now, which we hadn't anticipated to run in the middle of the year, but I guess with COVID-19, you can't really anticipate anything these past years. But yeah, we started last year.
What spurred COOK4CALD to form?
I guess what spurred it was seeing, I would say, a lot of the disadvantages that I guess came to light with coronavirus. I think especially last year in our long lockdown here in Melbourne, we had a lot of I guess a lot of the flaws that are existent in our society that came to light. And I guess we realized that there was a need for, I guess, a meal-based service provider, especially here in Casey. In Casey, we have a very big COLD community. We're a very diverse local government area. I think it was 44,500, I guess, COLD community members that were living below the poverty line or were in some sort of need, underprivileged. So that's kind of where we came from, and that's kind of how we started. We started off really small. I remember our first couple of weeks we were only getting like 40, even probably less orders. And I remember our last program that we just ran last week, we had over 200 orders. So
Wow.
we've pretty big, pretty quickly, but we're getting the hang of it, and we have a great team. So
there definitely must be some sort of a need that you guys are addressing.
Yeah, I would say there definitely is, yeah.
What was the gap before COOK4CALD came into the picture? How were people getting meal packages similar to the ones that you offer?
I'm not sure if there really was a specific meal providing or free meal provider within the Casey community. There may have been small pockets of, I guess, very culturally based, even like church groups that were providing to their community and their direct community. But what we're trying to do is trying to reach as many people as we can as possible. So we deliver from like Pakenham all the way to like Narre Warren. We've gone to, I think we've been to Clayton, which is a bit out of our area, but where there's a need, we don't hesitate to provide for that. So we really try to reach as many people as possible. I think the biggest problem, especially with our service and with COLD communities, that is access, is a lot of barriers to access. So I remember before we actually went into this lockdown, one of our big, I guess, ideas or days that we were going to run events was a support market, which was just a coming together of all these local community groups that were trying to do something to help further access for COLD communities in the Casey area, so that people knew what kind of, I guess, supports were available to them in that area.
When you say that CALD communities face barriers, what sort of barriers are you referring to in getting this kind of support?
It can be linguistic barriers a lot. A lot of the times, especially kind of with, I know that there's, for example, like libraries, especially the community-run libraries, have legal-based services that they offer. Sometimes it can be hard to get this information out to CALD communities, especially when they don't speak English. And I guess being in Victoria and in Melbourne and Australia, we do speak English, and that's primarily what we try to communicate in. So we kind of forget that not everybody communicates in our language, and that there are big pockets of our society, because we are a very multicultural society, and it's one of the things that makes us so great as a country. But we do forget that there are so many migrants and that don't speak the same language and therefore can't access the same resources that we would find so easy to access. And I think especially with a lot of things being online these days, it can be very hard to even just find the pockets that need help. We did have a couple interpreters and translators working for us within the first program, which I think will carry through to the next program as well.
That's fantastic. So you actually have interpreters who work with you. How do you primarily reach the people who can receive your food?
So at first we did just, I think we were just on Instagram and we just made a big call out to whoever we could. Then we started partnering with groups like even cultural-based like university groups. So I think we had the South African group at Monash University, I'm pretty sure we did. Now we have a big partnership with the City of Casey, the council, who can help us reach out to a lot of community leaders. But yeah, now I guess our name has gotten out there a bit more. We've gone to pastor leaders who have spread the word. So we're really still trying to grow, but we have started partnering with all these different people and we're still trying to get our word out there, but I think we are doing pretty well.
You started as a volunteer, you mentioned.
Yeah.
What drew you to COOK4CALD?
I've always been interested in volunteering. I could say it was never accessible to me, but I think that would be a lie. I think this was much more accessible to me. And I think knowing Ashvina, it was much easier to get involved. I think what prompted me was in the first lockdown when we had the big shutdowns of the community towers, the community living towers and the residential towers, and just seeing that the way that I guess the government handled that and how they provided food to those culturally diverse communities that were living in those towers just wasn't right. And I thought if we can help in some sort of way to, I guess, relieve what people were going through at this time, especially that I come from a more privileged background, I would love to be able to help in that way. And the summer program was just so great. It was great. It was a really good feeling knowing that we were helping people. So.
You mentioned Ashvina. So for context, she's the founder of COOK4CALD.
Yeah.
How many people does it take to prepare 200 meals? Because I watch your Instagram live videos and stuff, and it's quite a slick operation for something that started last year.
Probably about 12 to 16, I think, is how many volunteers we have weekly. So it's not a massive operation. I think the hardest part is just making sure that we have everything done in the right order, which we've gotten so much better at organization with our meals and our recipes and everything since last year to this year. This year we're doing things a lot more efficiently, just production lines are a lot more efficient, things are getting out a lot more efficiently. It just takes practice, really. Yeah.
Who does the menu planning?
Menu planning we do together as a group, the executive team. So there's Ashvina, myself and 6 other people. And so we all come up with the recipes together. One of our colleagues, Beth, she's the admin officer and she helps with all the recipes, and she writes up all the recipe cards. We'll make sure that the quantities are right for the recipes. So it's really an all hands on deck kind of thing. Everybody has their individual roles, but it just flows together so well as a group. So
that must feel really great, right? To come up together organically and suddenly it just kind of clicks and everyone's moving in this sort of synchronized manner. You mentioned earlier, like when you observed the lockdown of the housing blocks in Melbourne and how the government dealt with providing food to CALD communities. What were they doing that was the issue?
I think the issue was mostly that a lot of the families couldn't eat a lot of the foods that the government was even providing. And that was where the big issue was that they were providing the food that wasn't even able to be eaten by these families. And, you know, especially that was such a tough lockdown. It was the first time we'd ever seen anything like that. And there was just no communication with the families that were living in the towers, what they needed.
Why do you think that problem exists?
I don't think we listen enough to the COALD communities. I don't think we really hear enough. I think we pride ourselves on being a multicultural nation, but we don't really listen to other cultures beyond our own. And I think that's a big issue. I don't think we take enough time to learn about cultures and even just what they eat, which is such a simple thing to learn. Like, we tend to look at what we have in Melbourne and we think we're like, wow, we're doing so great because we have an Indian restaurant and we have, you know, Italian restaurants, and we think, oh, we're doing so great, but we don't really listen to other cultures when they're telling us that something is wrong or that there's a barrier.
How does COOK4CALD now fill that gap with regards to the food you provide?
Yeah, so a lot of the food that we provide is, we make sure that all our meat is halal. A lot of the times we're only providing chicken or turkey because it's much more widely eaten by a lot of communities, and it means that especially things like pork, we're not cutting out people who can't eat pork. So it's much easier for people to access, well, okay, I can eat this. A lot of our foods are like culturally appropriate, I guess, for lack of a better word. We have vegetarian options every week. We try to cook from a large range of cultures. So anything from Indian food to Thai food to Vietnamese food, we've tried to cook as much of as wide of a range as possible so that we make sure that we're trying to get to every sort of subsection that we have in our community. Yeah.
What's been the most popular dish?
Oh, it's hard to say.
Oh, your personal favorite, I guess.
My personal favorite, we make a pretty good paella. Last week we cooked paella, and that's when we had the 200 orders. But I would say everything that we've cooked has been pretty good. I mean, I'm pretty biased, but I would say we have cooked pretty good food.
How are you guys funded?
We're all community funded. So we have started applying for grants. So we are in the process of trying to figure out how and navigate, I guess, that process. But a lot of our funding does come from people in the community, or we are donations based. So that's really where we've gotten a lot of our funding from.
Running an organization like this, what are some of the challenges that you face?
I think funding would definitely be a big one, especially in hard times like this. It can be hard to give. I know that there's a lot of people out there who probably wouldn't have the means to give to an organization right now, especially with everything that's going on with the lockdowns and not being able to work. So I would say that funding is definitely a big one, because it even comes down to, it's not just funding for food, it's funding for equipment and funding for the hire of the kitchen. So that really is pervasive in every aspect of how we run as an organization. And I think also even just getting our name out there so that we can reach as many people as possible is also a tough thing to do. But I think we're doing quite well.
What has the response been like?
We've had a really good response. Just families have been extremely thankful. Sometimes we get messages come through, and it's so nice to read that what you're doing actually makes a difference, because I think it can, sometimes when you give your money to an organization or when you volunteer, you don't think about how much you're actually helping someone, because you don't really see that help come back to you, or that, I guess, the gratitude in any way. But I think it's so nice to read some of the messages from some of the families that say, like, we're struggling so much and you've helped us out, even if it's just for one night. It's just so nice to know that you're making a difference in someone's life.
So do you do sprints? So this is not every weekend, you kind of do blocks of relief periods?
Yeah, so we had just started with the summer program last year, and initially our idea was that we'll run this summer 2021/2022. But then we did have this lockdown that just happened out of nowhere. I think a lot of people can feel the same way about that. We decided that now would be a good time to help again, being that people were probably out of a job. A lot more people were facing financial hardship than before earlier in the year. So we hadn't planned to run this block, but we did run this block. And I think if anything like this was to happen in the future again, it would be something that we would definitely consider. I think Ashvina's vision for COOK4CALD is not just to be a food delivery service, but to sort of be like a kind of hub where CALD communities can access, and they can access various different supports, not just meal delivery. So
that's a nice vision.
Yeah.
Almost sort of a place to come together, I think. What has this journey with COOK4CALD taught you over this past many months that you've been involved?
I think gratitude for what I have. And I mean, I know myself personally, I've never really had to worry about food security. And I think that's been a big eye opener, that there are a lot more families than you think out there who are looking for some sort of food security and who don't have that, especially in my area, because I think we're not a wealthy area and we're not a poor area, but sometimes it's very easy to get blinded by what you see. So like the friends that you have or the place that you go, it's very easy to think that everything's all, I guess, rosy. But there are a lot of people out there who are struggling, and I think it's just been such an eye-opener to be able to give back. Even just a small difference can actually make a big difference in someone's life.
Has anything surprised you?
I think how fast we've grown has really surprised me. I genuinely didn't expect that we would go from how many orders we had last year to how many orders we have in the middle of this year. That's been like 6 months. And I think that really does say something about how much even just community groups like this are needed. The rest of the executive team, would probably say the same thing, is that it's just been crazy to see how much bigger we've gotten.
That almost signifies such a great need, right? If you can grow to this level. How can people help COOK4CALD? Do you guys do fundraising? How can people get involved?
Definitely when things open up, we'll have more fundraising events. I know we have a couple in the pipeline that we're working on. If people can, which not everybody can, and we completely understand that, but if people can, donations are a big source of how we operate. So doing the invoicing, I know that things like a meal never costs us more than $5 per person. So even just a $5 donation can feed one person, sometimes more than that, depending on what we're cooking in the week. So it doesn't have to be anything big or exponential. Even just old equipment can be helpful, but sometimes it's just engagement, just like following us on social media or getting our name out there to people that you might know. Just things like that can also help a lot. There's also obviously, if there are any youth out there who do want to volunteer, if you go to our website, which is www.cook4cald.org, I think there'll be a link there that will take you to our volunteer application page, but they are closing soon for the summer program, but they'll be opening again next year.
Many of us might think, we live in a neighborhood and people are pretty much doing their own thing, but a lot of people might actually be having issues with access to food, because I think sometimes we think about these things as, being destitute or having to be homeless to signify that you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Knowing what you know now, how would you approach kind of finding out if this problem exists with your neighbors or in your community?
I think you're right in saying that a lot of us look at something like food security as something that I guess a lot of just homeless people struggle with. We don't necessarily think about people who might live with a family or live in a house like yours or mine and think that they could be struggling with food security. If you feel, I think, that you might know someone who might be struggling, just to have that conversation. And it doesn't have to be a big out there conversation to make someone feel like, oh no, am I putting something out there that might give off that vibe, but just to let them know that there is support out there, because it could be someone close to you that you know, it could be someone that they know, it could be someone that someone knows, just getting involved in your community and realizing that your little bubble is not the only bubble that's out there. There are a lot of people around you who might be struggling with a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be food security. It could be things like even mental health or there are just a lot more issues out there than I think we think. And I think it's important to have those conversations.
If there's something someone should take away from this interview, what would that be?
I would say just try and get involved. Just try and see sort of what's beyond your horizon. Because I think for me personally, that was a big thing, is that I feel like I had been socially conscious before even, but I think getting out there and volunteering has actually made me see that there's a lot more people out there than what I think that might need some sort of aid. And it doesn't have to be anything major. And I think what a lot of people need to remember is that there are so many ways to help. It doesn't have to be monetary, and it doesn't have to be volunteering, because not everybody has the time and not everybody has the means. But it could just be something like sharing our post to your story. And that's true for any small volunteer-based community-run organization, is that a lot of the times support is so important for small organizations, and especially small not-for-profit organizations that are trying to give back. It's just putting the support out there and letting people know that there are ways to access different avenues of help in the community.
Do you think COVID has probably accelerated a lot of this awareness?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. I think before COVID, I think there was a bit of a veneer of everything's okay, because I guess COVID has actually exposed a lot of the cracks that were in our society. I mean, in every avenue of our society, we've kind of seen cracks exposed, and I think that's been the one. If there's one thing to take away from coronavirus, it's that there are so many things that we need to fix as a society, and so many areas that we can fix. I mean, even if you look at who coronavirus affects more, it disproportionately affects those who are from a different cultural background, who are at a lower economic status, who live in different areas that might be more culturally diverse, who might live in bigger family units. I think that's something that we also need to remember, is that COVID has exposed so much, and it's just made all these problems not even grow exponentially, because they were already growing exponentially. It just made them come to the forefront. And I think that's something that we can all take away from coronavirus, beyond just it being a global health pandemic.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe or follow it on social media. Your support will help this podcast reach more listeners. You can also check out the podcast and transcripts on whatcanwedopodcast.com. This podcast is produced by Samuham Media.